I want you to take a deep breath. Right now, breathe in, hold it, and let it go. Now, let me tell you something that might shake you up a little. You are enough. Not when you get the job, not if you lose the weight, not after you fix that relationship. Right now, as you are. Messy, imperfect, improgressive. You are enough. I know some of you just cringed a little. I see it because we've been trained, conditioned to believe that enough is a moving target, something we have to chase, something just out of reach. But here's the truth. You were born worthy, period, full stop. And yet, we spend so much of our lives proving, perfecting, performing, and pretending. We armor up, believing that if we can just be more successful, more likable, more in control, then we'll finally feel whole. But here's the irony. Wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from owning our imperfections. Let me say that again for the people in the back. Your worth isn't on the other side of achievement. It's on the other side of acceptance. So, what's the most important message you can give yourself today? Say this out loud if you can. I am worthy of love and belonging exactly as I am. Not when you prove it, not when you earn it, right now. Because the moment you stop hustling for your worth is the moment you set yourself free. Let's start with the truth most of us don't want to say out loud. We spend a lot of our time and energy trying to earn our worth. We hustle. We overextend. We try to prove we're good enough by checking boxes, accomplishments, appearance, success, approval. But what if I told you that none of that is actually required? What if the message, the real message, is that you are already enough, just as you are, right now, in this moment, not one promotion, pound, or performance away. Right now, I know how uncomfortable that sounds to some of you. It's easier to live in the illusion that one more win will finally make us feel whole. It's seductive, that idea. It keeps us busy. It gives us something to chase, but it's also a trap. Because the more we chase enough, the more it slips through our fingers. It becomes a finish line that moves every time we get close. We hit the goal and the goalpost moves. We finally get the praise and 5 minutes later we're wondering how to get more. That's not living, that's surviving. And you were made for more than survival. Here's what no one teaches us growing up. Worthiness is not a reward for performance. It is a birthright. You didn't come into this world broken. You came in whole. But the world, through shame, comparison, and fear, taught you to doubt that. It layered over your sense of self with lies. That you have to earn love, that you have to prove your value, that being accepted is conditional. We internalize that. We believe we have to do something to be something, and it's just not true. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are not a project that needs fixing. You are a human being, gloriously imperfect and deeply worthy. And the idea that you must meet some external standard before you can feel that worth is one of the greatest thieves of joy. It robs you of the peace you could have right now. It keeps you stuck in the once I get there mindset. But healing begins when we realize there is no there. There is only here. There is only now. Being enough doesn't mean you don't grow. It doesn't mean you stop evolving or that you settle. It means your growth is not fueled by shame. It means you can want more, not because you think you're unworthy, but because you know you're worthy of growth, expansion, and joy. There's a massive difference. One path is rooted in fear. If I don't improve, I won't be lovable. The other path is rooted in compassion. I love who I am, and I'm excited to become more of me. That shift, that's everything. Let me be clear. Saying you are enough is not about ego. It's not about pretending you have it all together or denying your flaws. It's about recognizing that your value as a human being is not up for debate. It's not negotiable. It's not dependent on your productivity, your paycheck, your relationship status, or the number on a scale. When you believe you're enough, you stop living in fear of being found out. You stop performing and start living fully, honestly, freely. And if you're thinking, but I've made mistakes, or I've got a lot of work to do, that's okay. We all have. That doesn't disqualify you from being enough. That proves you're human. The work is not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about owning your story, not editing it to be more acceptable. You don't have to have it all figured out to be worthy. You don't have to be healed to be whole. You don't have to be extraordinary to be enough. You already are. That's the revolution. Let's get honest about something that most of us feel but rarely say. We've been trained, not just influenced, not just nudged, but trained, conditioned, molded to believe that enough is something we have to chase. It's never given to us freely. It's dangled in front of us like a prize, and the rules for winning it, they're always changing. From the time we're little, we're taught to look outside ourselves for value. Gold stars, test scores, beauty standards, social status. This is where the chase begins. And for most of us, it never stops. Think about it. From the playground to the boardroom, we're constantly measuring ourselves against someone else's ruler. We're taught that our worth is a scoreboard tied to how productive we are, how successful we look, how much we achieve, and how little we fail. And here's the catch. Society doesn't even define enough in a consistent way. One minute it's about being thin, the next it's about being strong. One year success means hustle, the next it means balance. The standard keeps shifting, and we can't keep up, not because we're failing, but because the game is rigged. When we live in a culture of scarcity, where never enough is the background noise of our lives, it seeps into our self-talk. We wake up and our first thought is, I didn't get enough sleep. We go to work thinking, I'm not doing enough. We look in the mirror and whisper, I'm not enough. That's not just exhaustion. That's systemic shame. We internalize the belief that who we are will never measure up. And that belief doesn't just limit us, it defines us. It becomes the lens through which we view everything, our relationships, our goals, even our capacity for joy. And here's where it gets heavy. Once you start chasing enough, you start believing that worthiness lives in the future. I'll be enough when I get promoted. I'll be lovable when I lose the weight. I'll finally feel proud when I make 6 figures. But what you're really saying is, I'm not allowed to feel good about myself right now. You're postponing your humanity. And what breaks my heart is that this way of thinking has become so normalized, so woven into our culture, that we don't even question it anymore. We just call it ambition or discipline or hustle. But let me be very clear. There is a difference between striving and chasing. Striving is about growth. It's about wanting to do your best because you know you're worthy. Chasing, on the other hand, is about hustling for approval because you think you're not. And we live in a world that glorifies the hustle. We wear busyness like a badge of honor. We praise perfectionism. We reward burnout. And in the process, we create a society of exhausted, disconnected people who are performing at life instead of actually living it. And here's the truth that society won't tell you. You cannot find enough outside of yourself. No job, no relationship, no amount of money or praise or power will fill the gap created by self-doubt. External validation is a sugar high. It feels good for a moment, but it doesn't last because deep down, your heart knows what your brain tries to forget. Real worth doesn't come from doing. It comes from being honest, being whole, being true to who you are, even when the world tells you to be someone else. And when you finally start to see that the chase is a setup, everything begins to shift. You start to realize that the standards you've been trying to meet weren't yours to begin with, that the measuring sticks you've been using are rooted in fear, not truth. And when you reclaim your right to define your own enough, you don't just stop the chase, you come home to yourself. And that, my friend, is the beginning of real belonging. When the world teaches us that we're not enough, that our value depends on how perfect, productive, or polished we appear, we adapt. We learn to survive. We start to protect the most tender, authentic parts of ourselves with emotional armor. And let me be honest, it works. For a while, it keeps us safe. It helps us fit in. But here's the cost. The same armor that protects us from pain also keeps us from connection, joy, and a full life. And we don't even realize we're wearing it most of the time. We armor up in so many ways. We become perfectionists, not because we want everything to be perfect, but because we're terrified of being seen as flawed. We people please, not because we always agree, but because we're scared of rejection. We control everything we can, not because we're naturally bossy, but because uncertainty feels too vulnerable. Every one of these behaviors is a shield, a defense mechanism, and they all say the same thing underneath. I'm not sure I'm enough, so I have to perform to be accepted. One of the most deceptive things about emotional armor is how socially rewarded it is. People will admire your perfectionism. They'll praise your productivity. They'll thank you for always saying yes, always being there, always holding it together. And every compliment reinforces the idea that your value is in your performance. So we keep the mask on. We tighten the armor. We become so used to hustling for worth that we forget how to just be. We lose touch with our real selves in exchange for approval from others. But let's be real. Armor is heavy. Over time, it exhausts us. We start to feel like we're living someone else's life, like we're playing a role instead of showing up. And that kind of disconnection between who we are and who we think we have to be is one of the greatest sources of shame and anxiety. You know that feeling like you're constantly on? Like if you let your guard down for even a second, the whole thing will fall apart? That's not strength. That's fear in disguise. And we've normalized it. We also start to believe that vulnerability is weakness. That if we show people the real us, the raw, the messy, the unsure parts, they'll walk away. But here's the truth. Vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is courage. And the irony, the very connection we crave, the belonging, the love, the understanding, it only happens when we're brave enough to take the armor off, to be seen fully, flaws and all, because connection doesn't happen through perfection. It happens through presence, through truth, through being real. Now, I'm not saying we should just walk around spilling our guts to everyone. Vulnerability without boundaries isn't brave, it's chaos. But I am saying that the armor that once protected us is now suffocating us. And if we want to live fully, if we want joy, creativity, connection, and meaning, we have to start recognizing when we're armoring up and ask ourselves why. We have to get curious about the beliefs we're protecting. Are we afraid of being judged? Are we scared of being too much? Not enough. And here's a shift. When you recognize that you're armoring up, that's not a moment for shame. That's a moment for compassion. That's a cue to pause and choose differently. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to show up anyway. So when you feel yourself slipping into perfectionism or people-pleasing or over-controlling, stop, breathe, remind yourself, I don't have to earn love. I don't have to hustle to belong. I am enough, and I choose to show up, not to perform, but to be real. We live in a culture obsessed with perfection. The right image, the perfect caption, flawless skin, curated lives, highlight reels. We've created this illusion that we can be edited into worthiness. But here's what I know deep in my bones. Wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from owning imperfection. It comes from standing in the mess, the contradiction, the not there yet, and saying, this is me, and I am still worthy. Because the truth is, your value does not increase when you're polished, and it does not decrease when you're messy. It just is. We've been taught that imperfection is something to be ashamed of, that mistakes are a sign of weakness, that struggle means we're doing something wrong. But what if struggle means we're human? What if imperfection isn't a flaw in the system, but the very thing that makes us real, relatable, and deeply connected to each other? Think about the people you trust most, the ones you feel safe with. It's not because they're perfect, it's because they're real, they're honest. They've let you see behind the curtain. And in that honesty, they give you permission to be real too. Here's the hard truth. Perfection is a function of shame. When we believe we're not enough, we try to overcompensate. We believe if I can just be perfect, No one will see my fear. No one will leave. No one will judge me. But perfection is a lie. It's unattainable. And chasing it steals our peace. It silences our voices. It cuts us off from joy. Because joy cannot exist in a life lived only for appearances. Joy needs space. Joy needs freedom. And freedom comes from embracing, not hiding our imperfections. Owning our imperfections doesn't mean we're celebrating mediocrity. Doesn't mean we don't care or we're giving up. It means we're telling the truth. It means we're being honest about where we are, about what we feel, and about what's real. There's nothing more powerful than a person who can say, here's where I fall short. Here's what I'm still working on, and I'm still worthy of love, joy, and connection. That kind of truth-telling, that's where transformation begins. That's where courage lives. And yet, most of us are terrified to be seen in our imperfection. We fear rejection. We fear being unlovable. But when we hide our imperfections, we hide our humanity. We hide the very parts of ourselves that connect us to others. No one connects to your perfection. They connect to your honesty. They connect to your resilience, your willingness to show up even when you don't have it all together. And when you're brave enough to let people see the unpolished parts of your life, you create a space where others can do the same. That's how we create real community, not through masks, but through mutual permission to be human. We don't find wholeness by pretending to be more than we are. We find it by accepting all of who we are. The brilliant parts, the broken parts, the parts that are still healing. Wholeness is not a destination you reach when everything is perfect. It's a decision you make to stop abandoning yourself, to stop waiting until you're fixed to believe you're worthy. Your imperfection is not a liability. It's a doorway. It's an invitation to live more honestly, love more deeply, and lead with more courage. When you finally stop running from your imperfections and start owning them, something shifts. Shame loses its grip. The need to compare quiets down. The self-criticism starts to soften. Because the moment you stop trying to be someone else's version of perfect, you get to be yourself. And that, your real, unfiltered, unfinished self, that's where the magic lives. That's where your story finds its power, not in the perfect chapter, but in the raw, unfinished pages that are still being written. Let's take a moment and call out one of the biggest myths our culture feeds us on repeat, that our worth is tied to our achievements, that our value as human beings is directly proportional to what we accomplish, how much we produce, or how far we climb. From an early age, we are rewarded for performance, not presence. We learn that being good means being busy, that being lovable means being successful, that if we want to be seen, we'd better have something impressive to show. And so we grow up thinking we have to earn worthiness. But that's not how it works. Achievement is great. It can be powerful, fulfilling, even beautiful. But it was never meant to be the measure of your identity. You are not your GPA. You are not your resume. You are not the title on your business card or the number of followers on your profile. Those things might reflect what you've done, but they are not who you are. And confusing the two, thinking that what you do equals how much you matter, is how we end up chasing a life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. I've sat across from CEOs, artists, athletes, entrepreneurs, people the world would call successful. And you know what many of them say behind closed doors? I'm still not enough. Why? Because they were taught that if they just achieved one more thing, they'd finally feel whole. But wholeness doesn't come from applause. It doesn't come from awards. It comes from within. The people who are truly at peace with themselves, didn't earn their worth. They accepted it. That's the difference. When you anchor your worth in achievement, your sense of self becomes fragile. It rises and falls with outcomes. If the launch goes well, you feel great. If it flops, you spiral. If people praise you, you're on top of the world. If they criticize you, you question your entire identity. That's not stability. That's emotional whiplash. And it's exhausting. But when you root your worth in self-acceptance, when you decide, I'm enough no matter what, then achievements become expressions of who you are, not attempts to prove it. Self-acceptance isn't passive. It's not about giving up or settling. It's the foundation for growth. When you accept yourself as worthy right now, flaws, fears, failures, and all, you create the safety needed for transformation. You're no longer growing from a place of fear or shame. You're growing from a place of self-respect. You're saying, I love myself enough to keep evolving, not to be more worthy, but because I already am. That kind of growth, that's where resilience lives. That's where confidence is built, not on shaky ground, but on solid truth. There's a moment that happens when people begin to unhook their worth from their work. It's quiet at first, scary even, like standing still after a lifetime of running, but then something clicks. You realize you can rest and still matter. You realize you can fail and still belong. You realize you can say, I don't know, and still be respected. That is the kind of freedom most people spend their entire lives chasing through external success and never find, because it was never out there. It was always within you, waiting for permission to be enough. So the shift is this: stop trying to earn your worth. Start practicing self-acceptance. Celebrate your achievements, yes, but don't confuse them with identity. Let go of the lie that says you're only valuable when you're winning. You are not a product, you are a person. And your value is not negotiable, not earned, not graded, not performance-based. It is constant, it is sacred, and it lives in the decision you make every day to accept yourself with kindness, with truth, and with love. There's a deep human need in all of us to belong, to feel seen, to know we're not alone. And for most of our lives, we're taught to believe that belonging is something we find outside of ourselves. We think it's about fitting in, about being accepted by a group, a community, a crowd. But here's what I've learned through the research, through the heartbreaks, through the quiet truths. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. And that kind of belonging, it starts with you. Fitting in and belonging are not the same. Fitting in is when you mold, shrink, or perform so you can be accepted. It's when you twist yourself into a version you hope others will approve of. Belonging, though, real belonging, is about showing up fully as yourself and being accepted because of it, not in spite of it. And here's the catch. If you're constantly abandoning yourself to fit in, you'll always feel alone because you've left yourself behind to gain approval that doesn't even feel real. That's why belonging isn't something you find out there. It begins with the courage to belong to yourself, to know who you are, to stand in it, and to be unapologetically rooted in your truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely. Because the moment you betray yourself to be liked or accepted, you've already stepped out of belonging. And that's the tragedy. We think we're avoiding rejection, but in the process, we're rejecting the most important relationship we'll ever have, the one with ourselves. Self-belonging is not always easy. It requires deep honesty. You have to get clear on your values. What matters most to you? Not what you've been told should matter. You have to explore the parts of yourself you've kept hidden, your quirks, your fears, your dreams, your doubts, and choose to love them instead of editing them. It takes work. Sometimes it takes unlearning years of conditioning, but the result is freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from being admired or applauded, the kind that comes from finally feeling at home in your own skin. Belonging to yourself means being able to stand in a room full of people who disagree with you, who don't get you, who might never fully understand your story, and still not abandon yourself. That's power. That's resilience. That's the kind of strength that doesn't need to dominate or convince or conform. It just is. And the more rooted you are in who you are, the less you need to prove it to anyone. You stop chasing connection and start creating it. You stop performing and start participating. You stop waiting to be chosen and realize you already are. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you truly belong to yourself, you open the door to real connection with others. When we're grounded in authenticity, we give others permission to do the same. Vulnerability becomes the bridge, not the barrier, and suddenly we're not just fitting in, we're being seen, not just heard, but understood. That's the foundation of deep relationships, of community, of love. It's not built on perfection or performance. It's built on presence, on truth, on shared humanity. So the question becomes, are you willing to belong to yourself even when it costs you approval? Are you willing to be seen, not just in your strength, but in your softness? Because that's what true belonging asks of us. It asks us to come home to ourselves, to our values, to our voice, and say, this is me. I may not be for everyone, but I'm no longer willing to abandon myself to belong to a place I don't even recognize. That's not rebellion, that's integrity. That's not ego, that's soul. And that's where your real power lives. So here's what I want you to carry with you. You are already enough. Not someday, not when you've healed everything, achieved everything, or finally figured it all out. Right now, as you are, messy, growing, real. You don't have to hustle for your worth. You don't have to keep proving, performing, or perfecting to belong. The most important message you can give yourself isn't about being better. It's about being braver. Braver with your truth, braver with your heart, braver with the decision to love yourself when it's the hardest. Because when you begin to belong to yourself, everything changes. You stop shrinking, you stop chasing, you start showing up fully, fiercely, freely. And that kind of presence, that's what the world needs. Not a perfect you, not a polished version of you, just you. Whole, human, and deeply worthy. So the next time you look in the mirror, don't search for flaws. Look for evidence of your courage and remind yourself of this truth over and over again. I am not broken. I am becoming, and that's more than enough.